Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, welcome. My name is Victoria and this is Time and Tenderness. It has been a while. The last video I posted was at the beginning of October, and at the beginning of October I was very pregnant, and as you can see now, not pregnant anymore. I am wearing Spanx, so I am cheating a little bit, but not pregnant anymore. My little man was born at the end of October. He is taking a nap right now. I am watching him on the monitor. He's taking a little nap right now, and I have been itching to get back into making YouTube videos, making day in the life videos, cleaning videos, cooking videos. I have been dying to get back into it. I wanted to take a little bit of a break because I knew it was going to be a bit of an adjustment period once Gabriel was born, and I wanted to be back making videos at the first of the year. Unfortunately, the first of the year brought on sickness. My husband and I, we ended up coming down with the COVID virus. We are okay now. It was a little bit rough, but we were very fortunate that we got a very mild case of it. We were vaccinated. It was something that we chose to do beforehand, so we think that helped a little bit, but it still was rough. And with a new baby in the house, we were very worried, trying to make sure that he wasn't gonna get it. We didn't do anything extra by wearing masks or anything. Excuse me, it's been a while since I've talked this much. Because he had been around us for so long. I just focused on breastfeeding him more and making sure that he had endless access to breast milk, because that really helps to fight sickness in babies. He fortunately, thank the Lord, never got any symptoms. He did not develop any symptoms. Me and my husband, on the other hand, we were suffering, but Gabriel was fine. So I had wanted to come back the first week and have a new video for you guys that very first week of 2020, but we were sick, and then because we were sick, we fell out of our routine. It took us a little while to get back into our routines that we had developed with Gabriel. So now we are finally back into the swing of things. So if you had been a long time subscriber to my channel, you know a few things about me. You know that I am a birth doula. I work as a birth doula several times a year. And you know, if you had been following my pregnancy journey along, that we had hoped and planned to have Gabriel at a birth center. Unfortunately, that did not happen. So judging by the title of this video, you probably already know what happened because I'm gonna put it in the title, but I ended up having a cesarean. So as a birth doula, I feel that it's very important to share birth stories. If you're in a good mental space to listen to a birth story, feel free to continue with this video. If not, if you deal with some birth trauma of your own, maybe save this video for a future time once you're ready to digest it, or if you just need to skip it altogether. I will be back to making regular videos. I don't know how regular they're going to be, and I don't know if I'm going to have a very religious posting schedule, same day of every week. I'll get them up when I get them up is pretty much. But if you feel the need to skip this video, go right ahead. I completely understand. But going back, being a birth doula, I think sharing birth stories is important. And I think sharing positive birth stories as well as traumatic birth stories when you're ready to listen to them is also very important. So I wanted to share my birth story and how I ended up having a very positive experience with my C-section. As a doula, I hear a lot that a lot of people are afraid of C-sections and that there is a very negative stigma surrounding them. I see it working with clients, and I see it online in online spaces, and even I myself was afraid to have one. But knowing what I know as a birth worker, I did ultimately choose to prepare myself for that possibility, since you can't control everything that happens at birth. Once you go into labor, a slurry of things can always come up or happen, and even late in pregnancy, things can come up and happen that completely derail your plans. So it is very important when making a birth plan to make a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C. So I did make a plan A. My plan A was to have Gabriel at the birth center. But if I happened to risk out of the birth center, I did make a plan B, which was to have Gabriel at labor and delivery at the hospital. And then I made a plan C just in case things went awry and I needed to have a C-section. Ultimately, we went through all 3 plans. So let me tell you exactly what happened. So we need to rewind it back to when I was about 30 weeks pregnant. I believe that was beginning of September. I can't remember. Whenever I was 30 weeks pregnant. I went in for a routine exam visit with my midwife, and at that midwife appointment, I had scheduled that appointment earlier than usual. I scheduled it earlier in the day. In the morning, my plan was I was gonna go to my midwife appointment, and then I was gonna go shopping at Trader Joe's because I've shared videos here before. I live a good distance away from Trader Joe's. I love Trader Joe's, and my goal was to go to my appointment and then go grocery shopping and then come back home, all while I was up in the Annapolis area of Maryland. So because I had scheduled the appointment earlier than usual, I stopped at Dunkin' Donuts to get coffee. This is an important detail. While I was at my appointment, she went to check his heartbeat. She measured my fundal height. I was measuring right on track. She went to check Gabriel's heartbeat, and she thought she heard an arrhythmia. Now, it can be common to have an arrhythmia early in pregnancy and then it resolves itself. So this was something that we wanted to investigate further. So the midwife ultimately chose to have me go over to a maternal fetal specialist office, which is a doctor that handles more high-risk patients. The reason I went over to this office was because they had much stronger ultrasound machines, as well as machines that I could sit on for a non-stress test, so that we could really hear Gabriel's heart and to really hear and see with the ultrasound what was happening. Now I was worried. In my mind through my whole entire pregnancy was torn in half. Half my brain, I feel like, was a doula brain, knowing what I know and knowing the facts and knowing what is logical, and the other hand, on the other side of my brain, I felt like a completely useless first-time mom, constantly doubting myself, constantly worried about everything. It was kind of like my brain was warring with itself. So I went to that office, I went in, and this is where things kind of got. At that point, my brain switched to doula mode because I was at an office that I was unfamiliar with, I was uncomfortable with, and I didn't want to be treated like I had something wrong with me. I already knew that I was having a very low risk pregnancy, that we didn't know anything definitively about Gabriel's heartbeat yet, and at that point I realized this could have all happened because I had a cup of coffee. Now, coffee in general is not dangerous in pregnancy. 1 cup of coffee a day is completely safe. I think it is like 200 grams of caffeine. If you keep it under that, you can have a cup of coffee. And I wasn't drinking coffee regularly, so I felt comfortable and safe enough to just have the occasional cup of coffee. So that's why I had coffee that morning. But ultimately, it made Gabriel very hyperactive, and that's why his heart was kind of beating really fast. So I was at the MFM's office. I went in for an ultrasound, and the ultrasound tech was looking at Gabriel's heart, looking at Gabriel, taking measurements and making sure everything was okay. And she looked at me and she said, "When's your due date?" And I told her my due date, and she goes, "You're measuring really big." And at that point, I rolled my eyes. Doula brain started to kick in, because I know as a doula, 3rd trimester ultrasounds are highly inaccurate. The only surefire way to know how big your baby is going to be is once your baby is born and they weigh your baby. Now, yes, if you have been going to an MFM and getting, say, weekly scans, an estimate for a birth weight is going to be a little bit more accurate. But me, I had only had my initial ultrasound to confirm my pregnancy, an anatomy ultrasound, and now this ultrasound because of the concern with his heart. So I had not had regular ultrasounds, regular measurements. So this 3rd trimester ultrasound, her telling me that he was big, I was kind of rolling my eyes. This is typical, this is highly inaccurate. We know this, it is studied, and it is well documented. So at that point, the doctor came in. Now this was when I started to get, at that point, they had already told me Gabriel's heart was fine. Nothing wrong with it. So I was relieved. But then the doctor came in, and that's when I kind of started to get a little angry. The doctor came in and immediately started talking about Gabriel's size, talking about how I'm probably going to need to have an induction, or else I'm going to end up with a C-section, blah, blah, blah. All this stuff that I knew was typical of an OB trying to scare a patient. Now, do all OBs do this? No. In my experience as a birth doula, when you're dealing with somebody who is mostly always working with high-risk patients, they always want to err on the side of caution. Now, I wasn't high risk at that point, and I still wasn't. Gabriel was fine. I was fine. But because this doctor is so used to dealing with very sick people, she wanted to just err on the side of caution. So that's what she was telling me about his size and all the risks. And I looked at her and I said, "Doctor, with all due respect, I know that ultrasounds are highly inaccurate in the 3rd trimester." And I spewed off the statistics to her, and she just looked at me and she like blinked and she goes, "Well, you could have hidden gestational diabetes." And I was like, I can't possibly have hidden gestational diabetes. I already took my diabetes test and I passed well within the parameters. I think this is just a case of the ultrasound machine being inaccurate, just like the studies always show. So at that point, I went to go sit for the non-stress test just to completely rule out anything wrong with Gabriel's heart. So I went out there and the doctor came, and this is when I really got kind of annoyed with the doctor. She looked at me and she said, "What body lotion are you wearing? Or what body lotion do you use?" And I said, "Oh, I use this stretch mark cream. It has cocoa butter and shea butter in it." She goes, "Oh, well, you should stop using that because cocoa butter and shea butter have caffeine in it, and it's probably what's making your baby's heart rate fast." And I was floored at that point. I was floored because by pure coincidence, I had just done a research project for doula work about shea butter and cocoa butter as pertains to stretch marks in pregnancy. And one of the topics I was looking to discover was, is caffeine still in cocoa butter when it's made into a lotion? And the answer is 100% no. There is no caffeine at all in cocoa butter once it's made into a body lotion. So I just blinked. I thanked the doctor. I was like, I'm gonna have it put it in my file that I never want to see her again. I prefer the other doctors that I would prefer to see any other doctor besides that one because she clearly was telling me something that I had already done research on that was wrong. So I got hooked up to the machine to monitor his heart rate to make sure that I wasn't having any contractions or anything, and the nurse came over to me, and at this point I went through so many emotions. I was worried about Gabriel's heart. I was blaming myself for the coffee. Now I'm worried about his weight, even though again, my mind is warring with itself. Half my mind was like doula mode and the other half was worried first time mom mode. And now I'm annoyed at this doctor, and the nurse comes over to me and she's like, "Oh, would you like to know how to read?" And I just stopped her. I said, "Actually, I'm a birth doula. I fully know how to read these machines." And she looked at me and she was like, "Oh, okay." And she ran away, and nobody came up to me to bother me again during my visit there. When she eventually did come back to unhook me from the machine, she was like, "Oh, well, your baby, he's the prettiest baby here that we've seen all day. You're like the healthiest person here." And I was like, "Yeah, I know. I already know I'm low risk, and no shame to anybody who's ever been high risk. It's just wasn't my situation, and I just didn't really appreciate being treated the way I was at that appointment." Because Gabriel got measured at that ultrasound, it got flagged in my medical file that he was measuring big. So at 36 weeks, I had to go back for a growth scan just to make sure that he still was either measuring on track or he had just had a growth spurt, whatever. I obliged, and I decided, yeah, it would be in my best interest to go back for a 36-week growth scan. So at 36 weeks, I did go back. I've been talking with my midwives, talking with my friends that work at that birth center. They know me as a doula. I know them. I've worked with them in a professional capacity. So I was able to be very open and honest with them and with my friends that work at that center. So I went back for the 36-week growth scan, and wouldn't you know, Gabriel was still measuring big. So again, I know in the doula part of my brain, 3rd trimester ultrasounds are very inaccurate, and the evidence really doesn't support induction for big babies, especially since I have no prior history of a pregnancy being big. I have no gestational diabetes, as well as my fundal height, which is the size your uterus grows from top to bottom. That was all measuring right on track. Ultimately though, I unfortunately risked out of the birth center because of the scans showing that Gabriel was a little too big. They estimated that Gabriel was going to be over 10 pounds. So I firmly believe that unless you have something like gestational diabetes or another underlying health condition, your body grows the baby that it can birth. So So I firmly believe that. I was not worried. Even if he was gonna come out 10 pounds, I was not worried about it. I didn't have any other underlying health conditions. All of my other measurements were measuring right on track. So I was confident, good to go. Even though I rushed out of the birth center, I was still going to be happy with a birth on labor and delivery. But then we hit another little snag. Because I once again measured big on the ultrasound with Gabriel, the OB at that MFM office put it in my file that they were recommending an induction at 41 weeks. So I was facing a possible induction at 41 weeks, and I did not want to do that. I wanted to try everything as naturally as possible to go into labor on my own before going in for an induction. I have nothing against inductions. As a doula, I have supported many inductions, but I just knew for my own mental health and my own emotions that if I didn't at least try everything that is safe to do at home to encourage my body to go into labor on its own, and I went in for an induction, I would be disappointed in myself. So I wanted to try everything on my own at home, and if none of that worked, then sure, induce me. So I was seeing my midwife weekly at this point, and I have no complaints with the midwifery practice that I was going to, that I still choose to continue to go to, except one thing. They did have a temporary midwife that was working with them who was seeing patients during the day, and I was seeing her just for my weekly checkups, and I asked for a membrane strip at around 38 weeks. She told me no. And I was very disappointed. She told me the risks and benefits, which I knew, and I don't think she realized I was a birth doula, again, because she was a new midwife to the practice and she was a temporary midwife to the practice. I went back at 39 weeks and I again asked her, hey, please strip my membranes, and again she told me no. Finally, it was a Friday in late October, October 29th. We were having a horrible rainstorm here in Maryland, and looking back now, I had been in early labor for a few days. I had been having very inconsistent contractions. They weren't painful. I was still able to go about my day. In fact, the Thursday, so it was Friday, the day before, my mom was coming down to stay with us because that Saturday was going to be my due date. Oh, hello. That Saturday was going to be my due date, and she just wanted to be with me for that weekend. And Thursday before she came, I was in major nesting mode, and I was on my hands and knees in the bathroom scrubbing the bathroom floor with the Comet cleansing powder. So Friday came, I kind of overdid it with scrubbing the bathroom floor. Friday came, we had the horrible rainstorm. I needed to go grocery shopping. I was like, I need to go grocery shopping. If I go into labor, we need to have a full fridge for when I come home. I don't want to have to mess with this stuff. So after the rainstorm had passed, my mom and I went to the grocery store. So it was while I was at the grocery store that I started having some more contractions, and I had to stop a few times in the aisles and just breathe through them. I wanted my groceries done. I wanted my house taken care of. I wanted a clean house, clean sheets on my bed, everything. I kind of probably on the inside knew that it was getting very close to my time. So we come back home. I made myself a special drink. Now this is something, I'm gonna be open and honest with you guys. As a doula, there are certain old wives' tales and tips and tricks about going into labor that I typically do not advise my clients to do unless they talk to their midwives or their doctors first. I drank a special drink. I'm not gonna say it here because I don't wanna endorse this drink because it was a mistake to take it. I thought in my mind if I took it before bed, I would sleep on it and then in the morning wake up, and if it worked, it worked. But no, I drank it around 10 o'clock at night, went to bed, and a half an hour later, I was feeling more intense contractions, and I woke up and I was lying in bed and I felt this ripping sensation inside, and I immediately got up and I went as fast as I could to the bathroom. I sat down on the toilet and my water broke. It was from then on out that it was go time. So my contractions began to come one on top of the other every 5 minutes, and they were strong. So I woke my mom up, I woke my husband up, and we were working through them here at the house. Because they were coming so regularly and so one on top of the other, we called my doula and she came over. So yes, we hired a doula. She came over and she assessed me like to watch me, to see how I was handling, to see how fast the contractions were coming. And she said, hey, we should go to the hospital. So I went to the hospital, and so it was about an hour drive from our house. That was the longest hour of my life. Laboring in the car is no joke. And we got to the hospital, and because of all the COVID restrictions, you have to check in at the front, at the desk, once you walk into the hospital, they want you to check in at the desk. And I'm in full-blown labor, and I was just like, I just ignored the security guard, and I just walked straight to labor and delivery. Now, this is a hospital I've attended so many births at. I know it like the back of my hand. So I was just like, I ignored him and kept walking. And my husband was behind. He was like, oh, she's in labor. And the security guard was like, oh yeah, I can see that. By the time I got to labor and delivery, I was having to assume very different positions to make it through a contraction. So hands and knees was what felt best. As I entered labor and delivery, I got to the desk, the nurse's station, to check in, and a contraction hit me, and I was on the floor, on my hands and knees on the hospital floor, and they're trying to, you know, have me fill out my intake papers, and I'm just like reaching up, like signing my name. It probably doesn't even look like a normal signature, but I signed it. My midwife came, she got me into a triage room, she checked me, and I was only 2 centimeters dilated. I was 2 centimeters dilated, but I was 100% effaced, which is really important. So because my water had broken, because I was clearly having contractions, one on top of the other, we decided to admit me into labor and delivery. So I labored all night, completely unmedicated. Well, I ended up choosing to have some IV drug use as an alternative to getting an epidural. I wanted to try as many things as possible prior to getting an epidural. So I got in the shower, I used the birth ball, I walked around. The shower was great. I also used my TENS unit, but finally it just reached a point where I just needed a little bit of rest. So I asked for a drug called Stadol. Now Stadol, I do believe, is a narcotic. They, you know, put it into your IV line, which was fine, and it only lasts about an hour and a half. That was the nicest hour and a half that I had ever had, that I was having during my whole labor process. I was able, it does kind of make you hallucinate a little bit. And it makes you feel very loopy. I felt good. And I know some people don't like that feeling, but after being in labor as long as I wasn't even in labor that long, but my contractions were coming one right after the other, nonstop, and they were coming hard. So having that hour and a half of relief, it does, like I said, it does make you hallucinate. So I happened to hallucinate that I was in Lord of the Rings in Hobbiton having breakfast with hobbits. So it was a very nice hallucination, if you do ask, if I must say so myself. So, but once the Stadol wore off, you can only get Stadol up until you're 7 centimeters dilated. After that, you can't get it anymore. And I didn't want to get checked so much, so I thought in my mind I was much further than I actually was. I probably could have gotten Stadol about one more time before reaching 7 centimeters, but I ultimately did not. By the following morning, Saturday morning, around 7:30, I recognized that I was not able to really relax my lower half. I had been laboring in the shower, we'd done the Stadol, I was laboring in the bed in all different positions, and I just was not able to relax my lower half. I was very much clenching my thighs and my bottom. So once again, my doula brain kicked in, and I recognized that that was a problem and that an epidural was going to be warranted in this situation. So the anesthesiologist came in, and it took him a few tries to place my epidural because I was trying, you have to slouch over so that they can have access to your spine, and my belly was so big at that point, I could not slouch over. And if I did happen to slouch over, Gabriel didn't like it, and he kicked me until I sat back up. Ultimately, the anesthesiologist did get my epidural placed, and I felt some relief after that. I was able to labor in the bed. We were joking, watching movies. I was on TikTok on my phone. I think Emily of Sweet Magnolias here on YouTube, she was selling some thrifted items on her thrift shop, and I was able to like buy a couple items while I was in labor. So Emily, if you're watching this, I was in labor shopping for those pictures that I bought from your thrift shop. So all of Saturday went, and my labor started to slow down. Now this is something that very commonly happens with epidurals because the epidural is in place. It just, sometimes your labor will slow down. It doesn't stop, but it slows. So at that point I had to get Pitocin, which I was totally fine with. I knew the whole process. I've attended so many births. I know the routine. So, and I was okay with the routine. So I got the Pitocin. I was just glad I had the epidural first before Pitocin contractions kicked in. Late Saturday night, I started feeling some pain again. I was starting to experience something called windowing with my epidural. Now, a lot of people know that sometimes you can get an epidural and it'll only work on one side or on one leg, stuff like that. Now, what windowing is your epidural is working everywhere except one little spot. And for me, that little spot was right here. It was about about that big of a size that I was feeling every contraction in that one isolated spot. So I was trying to go, if I laid on my left side, all the epidural medication would go to that spot and I wouldn't feel anything. But Gabriel did not like my left side. He was starting to have some heart decels when I would lay on my left side. So I decided, you know what? Him having heart decels is not worth it. That's dangerous. So I just went and laid on my right side, and he was as happy as a clam. I would use hot packs on that one spot. I would press, when I would have a contraction, I would press back on it, and that seemed to help. By Sunday morning, I was feeling pressure and the need to push. I pushed in just about every position possible. Up until that point, my labor was going pretty much textbook, pretty much typical as labors go. With the exception of me laying on my left side and Gabriel being unhappy with that, every other position he was completely fine with. I was handling everything greatly. He was handling everything greatly. Everything was going smoothly until I started pushing. I pushed on my hands and knees. I pushed on my back. I pushed with the squat bar. I pushed pulling on the rebozo. I pushed every possible way I knew how. I had reached 10 centimeters, you know, because I was pushing already. And my husband actually was very excited. He wanted to be able to catch Gabriel as he was born. So he was in position to catch. The midwives were there. I was pushing. Gabriel was right there. We could see that he had a full head of hair. The midwife was watching me push, and she was watching me push, and she was watching me push, but I wasn't making any progress. So I asked for her, so something that I was okay with was I wanted guided pushing. So I was thinking maybe I wasn't pushing correctly. So sometimes, now this might be TMI for some people, but sometimes when you are in labor, you need help knowing where to push. So your doctor or your nurse or your midwife, they will put their fingers where you need to push. So I asked for my midwife, can you put your fingers in so that I can kind of feel where you're putting pressure so that I know I can push against that. So she did that, and she was assessing Gabriel's head as I was pushing, and she came to the realization that there was something wrong with my tailbone. Now, this was not anything that we could have ever foreseen. I have looking back now, there is a memory that I have as a little girl of falling on my bottom, but that's something that I'm realizing, but there was no way to know that there was something wrong with my tailbone prior to me being pregnant or prior to labor at all. So as I was trying to push, it appeared that my tailbone was hooking Gabriel's head in place. He was not budging, and I was pushing hard. I pushed so hard I broke the capillaries in my cheeks. So it was at that point that the midwife let me know, and she turned to my mother and asked, hey, did she ever have an injury? And my mom said, I don't know. I was exhausted at that point, and I was still ready to keep on pushing because I wanted him out at that point. It was now going on 36 hours of me being in labor. My midwife very kindly looked at me. She said, I think we need to discuss alternatives to how we want Gabriel to be born. And I looked at my husband. Who was in the corner of the room. He had bought in a very special bottle of whiskey to celebrate when Gabriel was born. And at that point, I looked over at him, and he was popping that bottle of whiskey open and taking a chug because we knew where this was going. And I said, OR, I'm ready for a C-section, because I wasn't gonna mess with Gabriel being stuck. I wasn't gonna mess with having to have a forceps or vacuum assisted delivery. At that moment in time, doula brain again kicked in, and I knew that this was the best option for us. So when I tell my birth story to people, I really like to emphasize that my C-section was never an emergency. I was completely fine. Gabriel was fine. I probably could have pushed longer if I wanted to. Nothing was emergent about my C-section. I opted for it because it was clear that if I continued longer, then an emergency might arise. So I might as well just go ahead and do it before, you know, stuff hits the fan. I did have a little bit of a pity party for myself. I was crying. I felt like a failure. Shannon, my birth doula, she was really good talking to me. My mom talked to me. My husband talked to me, and I was like, you know what? This is what's best. I don't know what's wrong with my tailbone. There's clearly something else that's going on here. Gabriel's fine. I'm fine. Let's just do this. So the doctor came in, and I was very worried, like, what doctor I was going to have for who was going to perform the operation. And the doctor that walked in was the doctor that the very first doctor I worked with when I attended my very first birth as a birth doula. And she was so wonderful at that birth. I was just so immediately relieved. I was like, oh my gosh, of all the doctors to come in here, it was that one, the one that I worked with for the very first time, and now she's the one who's going to be delivering my baby. So we went back into the OR, and I was still having windowing with my epidural, meaning I could feel everything. And I let the doctor know that. I was like, hey, I still feel on my left side in this one spot. She said, okay, we're gonna assess that, make sure, because I was terrified that I was gonna somehow feel the incision at that point. That was my new fear that had popped up. So the anesthesiologist came in, the doctor came in, and she took the scalpel and she started poking me on my lower abdomen. And when it got to that point where I had the window, I could feel everything, and I could feel how sharp it was. It didn't hurt. It was like when you take a paper clip and you poke yourself. It didn't hurt like that. That's what it felt like. So they pulled out my epidural, and I got a whole spinal block. So it was at that point that I'm lying on the OR. I'm praying like so intently. My husband is praying with me. Like it was scary because as a doula, I have supported cesareans before, but I never got to actually attend a cesarean. Usually I am in the recovery room waiting for my client to come out of the OR so I can take care of my client at that point. I had never actually witnessed a cesarean besides my own at this point. So I was just staring at the operating room lights, just counting, and I could feel, I was moving around a lot on the table because Gabriel's head was so stuck on my tailbone. She had to reach up inside me and push his head back up. And my husband said he heard an audible slurping noise. I know that's probably too much information, but just to show you how stuck he was on my tailbone. I think the surgery happened so quickly, like 30 minutes to 45 minutes, maybe an hour. It was so fast. And I just hear Gabriel, I felt this weight like release, and I just immediately heard the most beautiful baby cry. Oh, and his lungs, I'm like tearing up right now. I just was so thankful. I was just praying and thanking God so much that his lungs, he just started screaming right away, because I didn't want him to go to the NICU either for breathing difficulties, because sometimes with cesareans, sometimes with C-section babies, they will inhale the amniotic fluid as they're being taken out of the incision, and they'll have to go spend a couple hours at the NICU to get all that amniotic fluid sucked out of their lungs. And Gabriel, that did not happen, thank the Lord. That did not happen with Gabriel. He came out kicking and screaming, and he was mad. But his poor little head, I was looking back at pictures. There was a wonderful, wonderful nurse in the OR, and she came up to me as they were prepping me for the surgery, and she gave me her phone, and she said, you can put on whatever music you want on my Pandora. So I was able to pick, because music was really important to me. That's what I had playing the entire time while I was in labor. And at that point I had lost my playlist because all my stuff had been taken away from me so that I could go into the OR. But she gave me her phone. I was able to resume the music that I was playing in my in the laboring room, and listen to that while the surgery was being performed. And she took my husband's phone and she took all the pictures so that my husband could focus on me, and she was able to take all the pictures of Gabriel being born, all the pictures of my husband meeting Gabriel for the first time, all the pictures of me meeting Gabriel for the first time. She was a real MVP because she did not miss a single thing, and she was able to take pictures in a way that didn't show any blood or gore or anything. She knew what she was doing when she was taking those pictures. So Gabriel was born. I was so relieved. Jack went to be with Gabriel in the recovery side, and while I was getting stitched up, and it was at that point that I spoke up and I told the doctor, hey, you and I have worked together before, I'm a doula, and her and I were joking back and forth, and I was asking her about I was being silly, not silly, I was, you know, in doula mode now for some reason. I was asking her about my uterus, and I was asking her about my placenta and all this stuff that no normal person would ever ask. So I got to meet Gabriel. Well, I got to meet him in the OR, but it was very briefly because they had to, you know, wipe him all down and make sure that he didn't inhale amniotic fluid. But once I was in recovery, I was just holding on to that baby, and his poor head. He had something on his head from being hooked on my tailbone called a caput. And that's when so when I was pushing and we thought his head was coming out, it wasn't his head, it was actually skin. The skin of his scalp I was pushing because his actual head was stuck on my tailbone. I was just pushing his scalp out. And he actually had, for a couple weeks after he was born, he had this horrible scab that was actually in the shape of my tailbone on his scalp. I felt awful, but he was born, he was happy, he was healthy, little guy. Oh my gosh, he was so cute then, and he is so cute now. So that is my birth story. I then went on to spend a couple days in the hospital for recovery. Recovery was rough, but I was very, very, very fortunate to have an amazing support system around us. My in-laws supported us. My mother stayed with us for about 2 weeks after Gabriel was born. Then we had a week off. My mother-in-law came and stayed with us, and she helped out during the day. And then my aunt, who lives in Georgia, she came and she stayed with us for about a week and a half, and she helped morning, noon, and night. Like, she was up every time Gabriel made a noise, she was up helping me, and I learned so much from all three of those amazing women. My mother, my mother-in-law, my aunt. I learned so much from them. Sorry, I'm getting like choked up telling all those stories because I'm just so grateful for the time that they took out of their busy schedules to come and take care of me and Jack, my husband, and Gabriel. So that is my birth story. I maybe will revisit this topic in the future if you guys want to leave me questions down below, but now I know exactly what you guys are waiting for, and you are waiting to meet Gabriel. Alrighty, please allow me to introduce you to Mr. Gabriel. It's your first appearance on my channel officially. Oh no. You just had to show the people. You waving hi? Are you waving hi? Can you smile? Can you smile? Well guys, this is Gabriel. He is 2.5 months old at this point. And Layla is also now demanding attention. Yeah, you want to talk to them? Yeah? So now that he is here, many have asked what is the future of my channel? What am I going to be posting? And the plan is to continue to post exactly the same. When I set out to start Time and Tenderness, my YouTube channel, my focus was on cleaning, cooking, cleaning, and homemaking things, and family things, just family life in general. Yeah? So now that he is here, none of that is changed. There are rules here on YouTube about featuring children, which I am going to try and adhere to. And I don't plan on this channel becoming a mommy focused channel, rather just a family and homemaking focused channel as always. Are we spitting up again? So a little short video that I posted a while back doing bath time with him, I did one of those YouTube shorts. Somebody did leave a comment concerned about how much I will be showing Gabriel on the internet, and as I was really thinking about it, taking the time these past few months to really think about my presence on the internet and think about Gabriel's possible presence on the internet, as well as how I want to move forward, and of course I want to protect Gabriel as much as possible. Oops, I dropped it. This is gonna sound really, really crazy, but as often as as often as you see Layla on my channel is about as often as you see Gabriel on my channel. So he is here to stay, but this channel is not going to be a parent, mommy, or child focused channel at all. And of course I will only be posting things that when he grows up, if he sees one day, he's not going to be embarrassed about. Do you want to talk to them? Tell them all about it. Well, now that I stopped talking, you stopped talking. You just want to talk over mama? He is growing like a weed, guys. I cannot believe how fast he is growing. He is 2.5 months old. He is 12 pounds, 23 inches long. He is a little piggy, little porker. Yes. And I am so proud of him, and I am so in love with him, and I hope you guys will enjoy seeing him from time to time here on my channel, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you on my next video. Bye.